Hey folks, Eric here from TOURNA-MIX, the ultimate mix competition website. If you like mix contests, please check us out. There's a link in the description below. We host 2 contests every month. It's a lot of fun, so get in there and join the battle. Today I'm going to be doing another full mix walkthrough using Noiseash plugins. Okay, you can see them called up on my screen here. Noiseash was kind enough to sponsor us this month, and I wanted to do some videos for them just to showcase their lovely console EQs and EQs. So you can see these 3 called up here. These are going to be the main plugins we focus on today. In my last video, I used the Need 81 console EQ as my main plugin, but today we're going to be focusing on the Need 84, all right, as well as their Pultec, which is fantastic, and this really cool Need 533 EQ. So huge shout out and huge thanks to Noiseash for helping us out this month. It's been a lot of fun so far. First things first, let's just hear the song. I'm going to play up until the end of the first chorus. Feel free to skip ahead if you already know the song. And if you're a TOURNA-MIX member, this is a slightly revised mix. Nothing too major, it just kind of cleaned it up a little bit compared to what was posted at the start of the month. Here we go.
I need you to shut me down, shut me down, shut me down. Oh, I need you to shut me down, oh, shut me down, shut me down. If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how, no, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left, saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath. Toxic, I know, call it vertigo. Tell me where you are tonight, tell me who you got sleeping by your side. If I know who she is, maybe I can start feeling cold again. Signal like a stoplight, green, yellow, red, am I yours? Are we friends? Are we strangers tonight? It's nothing new, running back to you. Don't tell me that you care and you'll always be there. If I call that you'll pick up your phone. 'Cause if this is the end, don't pretend you're my friend, 'cause I'll think that you still love me. So I need you to shut me down, oh, shut me down, shut me down. I need you to shut me down, oh, shut me down, shut me down.
Yeah, so really great pop song. Let's take a look at how I approached this mix. I think today I'll start with Mix Bus and just sort of show you some of the things I have that affect the entire mix. So up first is the Rule Tech from Noiseash. I love this plugin, and you can see here I've got a huge boost at 12K as well as a big boost at 60 Hertz with a little bit of a cut, right? That's the Pultec trick of pushing up and cutting. All right, I'm pushing up some 200 Hertz, cutting a little bit of 3K. That was mostly from the chorus that I found was just a bit harsh. And that's pretty much it for this plugin. Let me turn it off. This is a pretty big one. Here we go.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how, no, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left, saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath. Toxic, I know.
So you can hear just a huge lift to the high end there. The whole song perks up immensely. It really almost just sounds like the song hasn't been mixed when this thing is turned off. And most of that comes from this big boost up here. But yeah, this is just a fantastic Pultec emulation. I've really been enjoying it over the last year. So that was the first thing that I more or less mixed into, especially the big push up at the high end. That was one of the first things I did to the entire mix. Okay, some of these other ones, like especially the 3K cut, that came a little later. I can't remember when I decided that the song was a bit lacking in low mids, so that's why I pushed these up. But yeah, I pretty much mixed into this EQ. All right, I also mixed more or less into my my SSL that I use in every mix.
Toxic, I know, call it vertigo.
If we go to the chorus, you'll see it's not hitting it too hard.
Think that you still love me, so I need you to shut me down, oh, shut me down, shut.
Actually, it's getting up there, 3 dB of compression in the chorus, but with a slow attack, 30 millisecond attack, and the sidechain filter engaged, 3 dB is still fairly transparent. It did give it a nice hug though. All right, then I brought up the Need 533 from Noiseash, adding a bit more high end and actually adding a high pass filter. This is one of the things I did in my revision, was add this high pass filter, sort of cleaned up the subs just a little bit, and an extremely small boost here, 0.2 dB at 150 Hertz, let's call it. But even this one boost up here at, what is it, at 13K? Okay, we've got about a dB at 13K. I'll just disengage just that band even. Listen how smooth this EQ is. I'll turn it off first.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how, no, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left, saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath. Toxic.
It's just amazing that 1 dB makes such a big difference. You know, small mix moves on the entire mix really do add up. So 1 dB is actually quite a bit, but I just love how smooth this EQ is. Super nice stuff. Then I came up with the SP Vitalizer. This is a very similar mix bus chain to my last video. So I use this mostly for width, but usually once I have it called up, I play with the EQ a little bit and just added a little bit more top end, okay? Well, I won't do an AB on that one there. It was pretty subtle. And then lastly, I did use Kelvin, and this was a similar to my last video, just for kind of clipping and general peak control, okay? This wasn't my loudest master by any means, but this kind of helped to keep my peaks down. But yeah, if I were to turn off all of the EQs, like the Rule Tech, the Need 533, and let me turn off the SPL as well, you'll just hear a massive difference here. I mean, this is night and day.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how, no, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left, saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath. Toxic, I know, call it vertigo. Tell me where you are tonight, tell me who you got sleeping by.
All right, and that was my mix bus chain. Lastly was just some simple limiting, which was doing about 2 or 3 dB tops. And this is just a gain plugin to lower the sound of this mix while I do this tutorial. So yeah, most of that was added at the start of the mix or near the beginning and kind of mixed into. All right, let's go check out those drums. Now, I actually didn't use the kick that was provided. All right, I'm sure it was completely usable. I mean, clearly it was chosen by the producer with a purpose, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get it to work. So I brought in 2 different kick samples. The main one was kind of an acoustic sample, like it sounds like this. Almost just sounds like a sample of like a real drum kit. And then to make it a little bit more distorted, I brought in this guy. Mixed pretty low. Okay. So that was the kick sound that I came up with. There wasn't really much to do to it because the samples were kind of already doing their thing. I did have to invert the polarity on one of them. Super important. Remember, whenever you're using 2 kick samples, even if they're samples, you got to check the polarity on those and the phase, okay? So I started out with that, and then the snare that was provided to us sounded like this. Kind of like an electronic sound, okay? Let's take a look at the processing on that. All right, now I showed this in my last video, but the drive on these EQ consoles is so cool. You can really hammer down peaks nicely. So I did add some drive to kind of crush it down a little bit. And let's take a look if we did any EQ here. You can see a big boost up at 10K. Okay, that's 3 dB, all right? As well as a fairly big boost, another 3 dB at 4.8. So this is just bringing in a lot of shimmer to the sound. Let me turn this EQ off. I'm gonna do that right here. You can see this little EQ tab here. Doesn't look like it did any filtering. So let me just turn the EQ off. It's kind of dark and woolly. Really beautiful EQ on this 1084. I think this is my favorite of the 3 console EQs for whatever reason. They all sound great, but I really love the way that the EQ sounds on this guy. So yeah, so there's our kick and snare. And if you're wondering why I brought in 2 kick samples, if I were to mute this kick sample, which remember, this one is a very distorted sound, okay? If I were to mute that, the other 2 samples together sound like this. But I wanted the kick to sound a little bit more like the snare, and the snare has that kind of bright, papery, almost distorted sound. So by bringing in this secondary sample, it made the kick and snare sound more unified. Here it kind of makes it sound more like the snare. They kind of relate to each other more. All right, so that was the kick and snare. Not a lot to show there, mostly just brightening the snare. All of the other samples provided, like here's the hi-hats, most of the other sounds, provided were well chosen and super appropriate. If I bring up our console EQ on this guy here, let's just hear the raw hi-hat. So you can see there's a really, really big boost happening here, 8 dB at 10K, all right? And also a high pass filter at 160, okay? So if I turn off the filter and EQ here, again, this is the raw sound. Filter on, not a big change. But then the EQ, very, very big change. Now again, I've got the drive going. If I were to turn this off, let's check our peak values here. So we're up around -9. Let's check it now. So I actually got much louder, but it's peaking a dB less. So this probably shaved off about 3 dB of peak level, which is always important, I think. And then the EQ was a big thing. All right, so one final on and off. Kind of dull. There we go. Just perked the whole thing right up. We've got this little drum loop, this guy here, which is a little later in the song. Let's go to the chorus. All right, so for this guy, I pulled up our channel strip here as well as a clipper. So we've got the Kazrog clipper, which I thought was just a little more transparent to control the peaks rather than using the drive. I think the drive, in this case, kind of distorted the kick a bit too much. So we got, again, a really, really big shelf here at 10K. All right, so 3.5 dB at 10K. And that is basically it, just that one EQ move. So here's without the EQ. I'm going to turn that off here. Kind of brings that top end to life a little bit. And that was pretty much it for the drums. I mean, these drums were electronic in nature, programmed, right? And so they don't require nearly as much work as real drums. On my drum bus, I am compressing and clipping, okay? So just doing a little bit of compression.
Shut me down.
About 2 dB and some clipping. Okay. So that was pretty much it for the drums. I mean, if I were to mute all of my processing, let me just actually keep the gain plugin on because that was just inverting the polarity. Here's the raw drums. They just sound a bit sluggish, right? Turn everything back on. Yeah, it just kind of brings them to life a bit. But again, like, you know, pop drums like this usually don't require too much heavy lifting unless the samples were poorly chosen. All right, so that was all I did for the drums. That's pretty much it. Let's hear the song now with the drums and bass.
Gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. Cause I don't know how, no, I don't know how to.
All right, so that's mixed. Let me turn off my 3 plugins and just let's just hear how it sounds with no processing on the bass.
Gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. Cause I don't know how, no, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left, saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath.
Yeah, so unprocessed, it just sounds kind of dark and muffled. It doesn't have enough definition. So here's the raw sound. In solo, it sounds perfect. But what I decided is in context, it needed a lot more bite and a little bit less of that kind of subby, dark sound. So with the console EQ, I brightened the top end quite a bit. Big boost at 10K here, like 4.5 dB about. And then a huge 7 dB boost at 3.2K and a little high pass at 45. So if I turn these both off here, again, this is like the raw sound. It does have a bit of drive in it right now, though. Let's actually just hear the drive. So we've got the filter and EQ off. Let me turn the plugin off and we'll see, you know, what the drive did just on its own. Not too much. It was pretty subtle. The EQ though, let me turn the filter on. Yeah, that EQ is the big one. If I turn the EQ off, Now in solo, it sounds a little bit sizzly or a little bit too thin, but with everything playing, I thought it worked really, really well. I've got a limiter going and a compressor on the bass as well. The limiter's first. Okay, a little bit of compression. Let's turn the whole mix back on.
In love, saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath. Toxic, I know. Call it for
Yeah, so you always got to listen contextually. Again, if I turn the EQ off, I find the bass too boomy and dark.
gonna break my heart. You might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how. No, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left. Saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath. Toxic, I know.
Yeah, it just kind of dies without it. So, you know, another good lesson of processing in context. In solo, I actually kind of preferred the bass without the EQ, but in context, I really preferred it with the EQ. All right, so that was the verse bass. Let's go take a look at the chorus now. Maybe we'll just hear everything without the vocals, just the bass and drums. Let's just hear this. All right, so again, we have that same plucked bass sound that we just looked at in the verse, but we also have this more, I'm going to say real bass, although I think it's MIDI, okay, but it sounds more like a real bass guitar. All right, so let's hear it raw. Here's the raw bass. And it's a mixture of these three. Kind of a DI sound, and this really crunchy metal thing, and some sub. So of course, the first thing is just balancing them in a way that makes sense. So this is the balance that I came up with for them. I really like that, even just on its own. Then mixed. Definitely got louder there. Yeah, so actually that's a pretty big change. Let's take a look at that. So we've got our console EQ first, followed by 2 stages of compression. Okay, so let's just start with those 3 plugins. So on the console EQ, I've got a massive boost here, almost 8 dB at 1.6K. So that was probably the biggest thing that I did. I'm also warming up the low end just a bit at 110. This is a low shelf, so almost a dB at 110 with a 70 Hertz high pass filter and a 8K low pass filter. Okay, I didn't use the drive in this case. So let's just watch the compressors here, and I'll toggle the EQ on and off and the filters. So you can see the compression is working pretty hard, probably 15 dB, right? Now let's try it without the filter and EQ. It's really messy. So first the filter at 70 Hertz. Even that helps. Now the EQ. Let's hear it one more time here, on and off. Here's off. Yeah. So that big mid-range push was a crucial move. And I find with Neve-style EQs, if there's ever a time to use them, it's mid-range on a bass. It's one of the, I just love the sound of Neve-style EQs on the mid-range of a bass. I think a lot of people do. They just seem to work really, really well. All right, so that was the EQ and compression. Okay, so pretty stiff compression and some pretty big EQ moves, and then just some limiting. Okay, and a final EQ. Now on the final EQ, it looks like it added a bunch of 100 Hertz, okay? So I'd high pass fairly high at 70 Hertz, and then pushing up more low end here. Doesn't look like it did anything else, okay? So we've got the limiting, which is just doing what limiters do. Pretty aggressive. Let me turn this guy off. Here it sounds just a little lacking in warmth. And now, yeah, that was a huge one. That really, really warmed up the bottom. So I like doing that a lot, high passing fairly high to kind of get rid of the low end junk. But then if it sounds too thin, just warming it right back up. So let's listen to the drums and bass again, fully mixed. And actually, we'll start fully raw again. Now, obviously, there is a difference in volume there, but a lot of it is just the way that that mid-range pokes out. It's there is a global volume difference, but the EQ is really what brings it out of the mix. So that was my bass processing, and yeah, I really liked the production there on the bass. Let's bring in some of the instruments in this chorus and start to bring it to life here. So we had the main rhythms. Okay, we've got this guy here. So let's take a look at what's happening there. It doesn't look like it had any compression or limiting. I mean, you can see the waveforms are totally distorted and flatlined, so they didn't really need compression. Let's take a look at the EQ here. It looks like I've got a push at 1.6K, okay, 2 dB. I've got a little bit of a bump actually in the low mids, which is not, you don't usually boost low mids on guitars. I mean, you certainly can, but often we're cutting that area. But I had over a dB at 350 hertz, and then a huge push down low here. Okay, so we've got almost 4 dB at 220 hertz. This is a low shelf. All right, got a high pass at 70 hertz and a low pass at 18K. Now, let me turn this EQ off. This is probably going to sound really thin. Let's hear the raw, and I'll turn the reverb off too. Yeah, it actually doesn't sound too thin. Let's hear what the filters and EQ did. Yeah, so what it sounds like basically with the EQ is just a lot more mid-range presence, and then, but also a bit more kind of warmth down low. And then the reverb makes a big difference to how it sounds. So totally raw. All right, let's kind of hear that in context. It's so important to hear things in context. So here's the raw. If I were to just turn everything off with just these rhythm guitars here, we've got this. Right, so just a lot more presence. I think that really clarifies the overall sound there. Let's bring in those little picking lines, these guys here. Yeah, so these were kind of boomy in their raw state. I think I did a pretty aggressive high pass at 160 here, okay, and another big mid-range push at 4 dB at 3.2K. All right, so I've got that going on. Another little gentle low pass at 18K, but that's nothing too crazy. This time cutting a little bit at 220. All right, but the main thing to pay attention here is the big push in the mid-range, okay? So if I turn off the EQ and the filters here, let me turn off the other two things, the reverb. Here's like basically raw with a bit of drive. You hear the low end is boomy. So the filter. That was probably as big a move as you need to do for those, just getting rid of all that low end stuff. And here's the EQ. Raw. Now the thing is we already have the rhythms, right? So we really don't need all that low end, okay? Because the rhythms are holding that down already. And finally, I'm also adding some reverb. This is a plate reverb here. Let's take a look at that. This is the same from my last video. This is a default kind of plate that I have in my session, in my template. A 2-second plate reverb is very handy on a lot of sources, I find. So I just have that as my main instrument plate. And then I used Omega A just to add a little bit more kind of aggression and distortion. So if I turn Omega A off, we were here. Just a bit more sizzle. All right, so let's hear the rhythms and the lead part. I'm going to turn those guys off here and just hear what they would have sounded like. It should sound a bit cluttered in the low mids. Yeah, there's a huge clash there between the rhythms and the lead part. Let's turn everything back on. There should be more clarity in the low mids now. Yeah, so you can hear that this console EQ just did the trick like super, super well. I mean, took away all the boominess and just added that extra little bit of presence that I think it needed. All right, so that was like the main guitars in the chorus. The chorus is sounding pretty good. There were a bunch of synthy kind of parts, which for the most part, the synths are all in blue here, these light blue tracks. So you can see I didn't really do a whole lot to them. I compressed a couple of them. I probably just used the console EQ for a filter more than anything else. Yeah, I didn't really, well, a little bit of top end on one of them, but the synths were pretty much shipped to us ready to go. So they didn't need a whole lot of work. I won't go into much detail on those. And actually they don't even really play in the chorus all that much. Most of these are just like little swells and swirls, which don't need real true mixing. The pianos did need a bit of work. So let's take a look at those. Let's bring in the pianos. Okay, so 160 hertz high pass filter and a lot of top end at 10K here. A little bit of drive as well, just trying to make them sound a little less MIDI. All right, so 4 dB at 10K. Let me turn this plugin off here and we'll just hear the raw piano sound. It's just a bit dark. Hear that comes to life. Turn it off again. And yeah, so with a big chorus like this with lots going on, you always have to make space for things. So you generally don't need all the low end, even though in solo it makes it sound kind of thin. You just don't need it with the bass and everything else going. So that was that, and then probably just a bit of compression. That was it. It's the same thing with this guy, just some filtering, and actually no EQ on that one. Right, so it's sounding like a chorus to me. So we got a few other tracks here that I haven't taken a look at. We have a little solo which comes in kind of later in the song. I didn't do a whole lot to it. Probably just some basic filtering. Let's take a quick look there. Yeah, so you can see our 360 hertz filter. Okay, let me just turn the filter off. Let's hear how... Yeah, so with solos, especially higher up the neck like this, you're going to get a lot of that boomy kind of rumble, but none of it really serves a purpose, okay? It's just part of the recording. It just gets picked up, but we don't need it. So I'm going to cut all that out with this filter here. And then let's see, there was no other EQ required, just some filtering and compression. You can just hear this wall of sound. So we're not going to need anything below 360 hertz on that. I won't say it here. You can read it for yourself. This little solo is the same thing, just the same idea of just filtering out the low end. 360 hertz again. Okay. Someone once told me that mixing is as complicated as you make it. So, for simple little parts like this, don't overthink it. A lot of the times high pass filtering is all we need, and maybe a little bit of dynamic control. Now, there were a ton of vocals, all these muted tracks here. Okay, these are all vocals. I'm not going to go over all of them, but we are going to take a look at the lead vocals, and maybe I'll show a little bit of the background processing. We've got this long verse here that starts the song, and the vocals in this song in general were not only really well sung, but they almost sounded mixed to me. I'm guessing there was some processing done because look, you can see that they're all compressed, right? This is what a compressed vocal looks like. Look at these. These are for sure heavily compressed. The lead vocal, it's not actually a stereo track, by the way. It just got sent to me that way. So yeah, we've got some processing baked in. Let's just hear that lead vocal fully mixed for a second.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how.
Yeah, killer vocalist. Let's take a look at how I approached this. It was very, very simple. Okay. As far as I remember, I had two compressors with the console EQ, a little bit of sibilance control, which is, you just kind of always need that to some extent. All right, so we had, yeah, this is basically what the chain looked like, followed by some omega A. So you can see here with, let's just check out the compression here.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how.
So serial compression is such a great way to go. Because these were already compressed, these vocals that is, there's not a lot of compression happening, but probably a good 8 dB at least. I'm using the drive here to add a bit of grit to her voice, but you can see the EQ, like I have a little bump here, 0.7 dB at almost 5K, 4.8K, a little bit of a cut at 350 Hertz. Okay, you've got almost a dB there. And then a fairly big, I guess, push up here down at 220. Okay, this is like 2.5 dB to try to warm up the sound a bit. So let me turn off the EQ. Let's just sort of hear where we started. I'll keep the effects on for now, but this is without filtering or EQ.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with.
You can hear it sounds great. This is a vocal that you could literally have not EQ'd and it would have been fine. Let me turn it back on.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how. No, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me.
Yeah, this is so subtle. You can almost not even hear the difference on and off. I think that this little low shelf push was nice. It added a bit of warmth to her voice. But honestly, I think these vocals were EQ'd on recording day. All right. So yeah, we've got our compression going, a little bit of de-essing. This is a really, really nice plugin on pop vocals, in my opinion. I never drive it too hard. You can see the drives all the way down. It just adds a little bit of crispiness. If I turn it off.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how. No, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left. Saying
I just love it. It's subtle, but it just brings it more into pop territory, for lack of a better way of putting it. I'm also using this little tone knob to brighten the sound just a bit. All right. So, I mean, yeah, these vocals were just super, super well produced and incredibly well sung. She's a great singer. If I turn off the console EQ, turn off the sibilance, turn off the omega A, and just keep my effects on, so we're literally just hearing compression right now, it still sounds really good.
if you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how. No, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left. Saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath.
I mean, even with no compression and just the effects, it sounds good.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with.
I mean, that already sounds pretty much mixed. I do prefer it with the processing, but not by a whole lot.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with.
Yeah, I really, really like that. So if you had like 20 plugins on your lead vocal and weren't happy with your sound, you probably just did too much. Now, for effects, this is literally exactly what I showed in my last video. And again, I get so much mileage out of simple, tried, tested, and true effects. I've got a plate reverb. Whoop, I don't know what happened there. There we go. That's better. 2-second plate reverb with a long pre-delay. This is, I think it's like at least 154-second pre-delay. I'm a big fan of this technique. This is something I picked up from CLA like many years ago. He was talking about using long pre-delays. I've never looked back. Most of the time it works. You just have to use your ear. But yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I've got micro shift going, okay, which is just classic on pop. Really, really hard to beat this plugin on pop, and a ping pong delay. All right, so I've got a little ping pong delay, just adding a bit of excitement on the side. So it's a 16th note. So it's actually not a ping pong. It's more of a dual. Yeah, it's a dual echo. So 16th on the left, 8th note on the right. Let's hear that vocal in solo.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how. No, I don't know how to live like this. Pushing me right, then you're pushing me left. Saying that you love me, but you're going with the same breath.
And there we have it. Sounds like a pop song to me. I didn't do too much automation on my effects. I would probably normally do more. There was for sure some opportunity to do some ear candy moments, which I never got around to. But just as a basic sound, I was happy with this.
If you're gonna break my heart, you might as well just get it over with. 'Cause I don't know how.
All right. Now, part of the reason why I absolutely love splitting up vocals onto separate tracks. So verse on one track, if you look up here, we've got way up here. There's so many vocals in this song. We've got our chorus vocal on its own track. That's this guy here. I probably also have the pre-chorus. Yeah. So they all need different treatment. So for example, I'm not going to go over it all again. The chorus was largely the same effects, compression, everything. But if I call up the console EQ, you'll notice here I actually did cut high end at 16K. Okay, I didn't do that on the other one. I even cut some 5K or 4.8K. I didn't do a cut here. Like the EQ has been tailored to suit the chorus. And this is why I love having them on separate tracks. Actually, it's pretty much a part of my workflow now when I get a vocal is to cut it up. It just works so much better rather than automating. There's nothing worse than automating EQ. It's horrible. Okay, so I recommend doing that. So yeah, I mean, here's the chorus vocals again, fully mixed.
Still love me so. I need you to shut me down. Oh, shut me down. Shut me down.
I think they sit nicely in there. I just found that with all the extra high end that was really sounding good in the verse, it didn't work as well in the chorus. So yeah, you got to customize your vocal for every part of the song, and multing it out is the way to go, in my opinion. We have this little pre-chorus breakdown, which I actually really like. It's one of my favorite parts in the song.
Don't tell me that you care and you'll always be there. If I call that you'll pick up your phone.
And you'll see here, like it's the exact same chain as I showed, but I don't have Omega A. I just didn't feel like it needed it for this little section. And the EQ is probably, let's take a look. So in this case, the EQ is flat all through here. Okay. I still kept that little 220 bump. Okay. But yeah, so again, just a good example of treating the EQ a little different section to section. Let's take a look at these little background vocals.
Don't tell me that you care and you'll always be there. If I call that you'll pick up your phone. Cause if this is the end, don't pretend you're my friend, cause I'll think that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I didn't do anything to them. There's no EQ. I didn't even filter them. Maybe I forgot to or never intended to. I'm not sure. I've got a little low pass here, got some drive. But again, these vocals were super processed before they ever got to us. So just some compression and reverb.
Don't tell me that you care and you'll always be there. If I call that you'll pick up your phone. Cause if this is the end, don't pretend you're my friend, cause I'll think that you still love me so. I need you to shut me down. Oh, shut me down. Shut me down.
So this is the chorus group
I
vocals.
need you to shut me down.
Here's without the
Oh,
console.
shut me down. Shut me down.
So you can hear with these guys, they just sounded a little bit boomy, I guess, especially with such a busy chorus. So I did high pass at 160, all right, and it doesn't look like it required any other EQ. So just some drive and a high pass filter, and that's all I did for these backgrounds. So here's the raw background group vocals.
I need you to shut me down. Oh, shut me down.
Right, so they just sound a little plain Jane. So yeah, just basically a high pass filter, compression, and reverb.
Shut me down. Shut me down. I need you to shut me down. Oh, shut me down. Shut me down. You never told me what was wrong.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, there was lots of little, vocal tidbits here and there, but nothing that's really worth digging into. If I open up my automation, you can see, I'm not doing too much, actually. I found this song didn't really need all that much. Even the lead vocal, the lead vocal was so compressed on recording day, I guess. And I added additional compression that there was really not any need to do any fancy automation work. And in general, actually, if you're doing automation for modern music that, has all sorts of little points and you're automating this and automating that and bringing this down and all that kind of stuff, honestly, you're probably just not compressing enough. I have found with pop, metal, rock, etc., the only thing I usually have to automate is the sections, so if it hits a chorus and you need to bump it up a bit, fine, do it. But if you're automating every little word, you're either not clip gaining and compressing enough, or I don't know. Yeah, it really comes down to that. You're just not doing enough of those other things. In this case, is a classic example. It already sounds good even with no compression. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're doing your automation, especially in modern music. You shouldn't have to be automating every syllable like you do maybe in less aggressive genres. So this is the mix, guys. I don't think there's much else to show here. I really enjoyed using the Noiseash plugins. One final thank you to them. If you're newer to mixing and you don't have any nice analog modeled plugins, it's a great bundle. Gets you the 1073, the 1081, and the 1084, as well as the Pultec. Can't say enough good things about their Pultec. It's one of my favorite EQs of all time. And then the 533 is also a great tool. I didn't use it as much in this mix. I'm going to start trying to use this on every channel and see what happens. I think it would be great on pretty much anything. But right now I'm treating it more as a mix bus EQ. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. There wasn't much to show. It was a great production. I sort of felt like it was just basic housekeeping for this kind of a mix and effects, right? So that's it for now. It'll be neat to see who wins this contest. So thanks for being here. Eric from TOURNA-MIX. We'll talk soon.